96.9 FM. Fresh news, smart talk, all day. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the position of the management and staff of Guardian Network.
Good night and welcome to the Doctors In with me, Dr. Janothra Archer Cartwright. Thank you for joining for all things health, wellness, and things that pertain to the Bahamian Society. We have a really interesting show tonight. It's something I think is very timely, something that we all need to know about, and it affects all of us in so many ways. And so I want all of you to come in tonight, and I want you to participate if you want to join in on the conversation. So I will give out the phone lines quite early tonight. But want to say thank you, brought to us tonight by Medical Concierge Services for all your medical healthcare need. We are a medical healthcare clinic. We focus on preventative healthcare. We treat everyone, children right up to adults, immunization, all the regular good stuff, and much, much more. Catch us on Facebook and Instagram. And you can check out our website, www.mcsfamilymedicine.com. You want to give us 61521. WhatsApp 432-4010. We're still taking some people for NHI, and we do, have all of our services across the board, including our concierge services. So you can hit us up to find out more about that. But doing that allows us to do this. And if you want to support the show, let me know. Any one of those contacts you can use, or you can send me a direct email at drd@mcsfamilymedicine.com. All right, thank you everyone for coming in. I know everybody's busy. It's been a hot summer so far, and I hope you're keeping hydrated and keeping well and taking good care of yourself, because I see a lot of people don't have the opportunity or aren't aware of themselves as they should. So put your health in front, and that's what we're really here to talk about. So when I go to the food stores and stuff like that, I always like to look at the labels of certain items to see, what's in it, what's good, what's bad. And I know for a long time, we've all been kind of concerned with GMOs, even though, they said, it's good, it's fine, it's whatever like that. But I saw popping up lately, and I saw a video on this with a young woman in the United States talking about bio, and I thought, okay, what is that? Is that something new? Well, it seems like they have kind of chosen another word, I guess, in the United States, changing kind of the classification of what a genetically modified organism is. And the whole conversation is, are these things healthy for us? So we're going to take a deep dive in tonight on what exactly a bioengineered food is. Is it here in the Bahamas? What should we look out for? And is this safe for us? Do we have enough information in order to, make really good decisions? Or are we kind of being force-fed kind of this new wave of doing food and what should go into our bodies? I think what the pandemic has taught us is that not everything is as it seems. We must be critical thinkers when it comes to what we put into our bodies, what people say is good for us and what's not. And it's very difficult as an average person out there to kind of differentiate between what's really good for us, what's not, because a lot of the people who are in positions to give you advice are also involved in a lot of this corporatization of health, and that is becoming a problem that I see every day. Not that their money, it's very important that people make their money, but to put that above the health and safety of people is an extremely dangerous way of doing things. And so we need to recenter ourselves in the medical field at large and just get back to our simple oath of doing no harm and being able to treat people and help them to have a really good, the best quality of life possible. And that's what it's really all about, creating the best quality of life. So there's a couple of different articles and different things that I kind of looked at, and including the definition of what a bioengineered or genetically modified organism is. And so I'll give you kind of one of the simplest with an example, and from there we will go on. And perhaps I'm going to have one or two interesting callers that come in tonight. I know somebody hit me up; they wanted to be a part of the show, so I will give the numbers because I'm gonna talk freely. 323-6232, 325-4316, 325-4259. Are bioengineered foods a problem? Are they healthy? Are they unhealthy? And how do we deal with that here in the Bahamas, where we import so much food into this country? And so McLean Meats actually did a really great article in March 3rd, 2022, where they posted about bioengineered foods, because we're going to talk about how most recently in the last few years, the organization, and they were having some controversy about labeling foods and what should go on the foods, because a lot of Europe and the rest of the world have banned certain foods, certain GMO foods. And so here we have this kind of re-engineering, in a sense, no pun intended, of naming these things and putting them out there. And what I feel is like a manner that people don't understand, because you know that it's a GMO. Why are we creating new names? Why are we changing the labeling system? Is it a dishonest thing? Should people really have the opportunity to decide for themselves whether or not the powers that be says this is fine, this is good for you, this is okay? Should you not have the right and the information to make an informed decision for yourself to say, hey, I do want that and I'm okay with it? I'm of the view that if it's controversial, if there are people out there who says, hey, this thing, we don't know what it is, we don't know what it's going to do over time, that it should be properly labeled. People should be able to make the choice. There are going to be lots of people who don't care if the food is GMO or bioengineered or whatever. And there are going to be people who are concerned about that. And I think it should be straight up, label it, let us know what you're putting into our bodies, and let us make a decision, because we can all think for ourselves. And this is the powerful thing about having rights and knowing your rights, is knowing that, just because you're a consumer doesn't mean that, we should be tricked or bogged down with other information. And I'm going to go into that, because what I found was quite alarming about, I know we import a lot of stuff from over there, so that's important to Bahamians. But just basically, bioengineered foods are those that have been genetically modified in a lab. And this means that the genes of one organism has been inserted into another organism in order to change its characteristics. The example that they give is the company Monsanto, and I'm sure many of you may have heard about them. Globally, they've gotten themselves in a lot of trouble for the way that they treat food. But this company developed a type of corn that was resistant to a herbicide, Roundup. So this Roundup was a really bad chemical, but it was really good at killing certain bugs and different things that were killing the corn, but it was really, really bad. It was so bad that it was actually affecting the corn. So instead of saying, hey, let's find something that's not so detrimental to the corn and maybe human beings, they actually developed a type of corn that would not be affected by those chemicals. This meant that the farmers could spray Roundup on their fields and kill weeds without harming the corn. While the bioengineered food may also offer some benefits to farmers and consumers, they also pose several risks. So what are GMOs? Because that's really and we're going to talk even a little bit about the history of all of this. So the term GMO is vague and it can mean a lot of different things depending on where you read. And it could refer to bioengineered or genetically engineered foods or, even products, animals, different stuff. Or just the ingredients have been genetically engineered for foods. So bioengineered foods are scientifically altered organisms that have their DNA changed using biotechnology such as gene guns, bacteria, and foreign genes. So they literally take the genes that they want out of a particular organism or somewhere else, and they kind of splice it into the genes of the plant or animal that they want to create the characteristics that are going to be beneficial for the grower or whoever is dealing with it for some reason. I think a lot of us know that they did this also with apples, some of them, so they could stay on the shelf for a very long time. Lots of different things they've been doing, and we'll go through the history of that. So genetically engineering is very different from traditionally breeding practices that allows DNA from one species to be introduced to another. So this cross-pollination or, cross species that we had done over years to breed the type of plants that we need to make them more resilient is something that has been done for a very long time, where they would take two variations of the same species and basically get the desirable traits. For example, to increase the hardiness of tomatoes, a plant breeder might cross a hardy variety with one that produces a particular taste. And so we've been doing that, and that's been fine. There's a huge difference between that and genetically engineering the crop, those that are traditionally bred, and crossbreeding crops that have been happening for thousands of years. But genetic engineering actually inserts new genes into a completely unrelated species. The example that they give is that there are soybean plants that have been genetically engineered to tolerate herbicides. And because these engineered soybean plants contain DNA from an unrelated species or another plant, the resulting soybean fruit might have all kinds of unpredictable and serious interactions with other genes within that organism, and as well as with other plants, animals, and humans. And so, it's like basically changing the DNA of a product and then developing the product and feeding it to other animals and humans. So are they potentially unhealthy? There are various streams of thoughts on this. A lot of the studies that have been done, similar to the injected people who are producing the product. So there has been lots of conflict of interest in the way that we've been doing science for a while, because if I'm producing something, I'm producing the study, and there's nobody really able to counter me, then that is a problem. We do need independent studies of things. So bioengineering is the process of changing an organism's DNA. This often results in foods that have been changed in an unnatural way, and there is a train of thought that this is not good for us and it's not healthy. These bioengineered food products can introduce novel organisms into our bodies, and some people suspect that they may cause harm. Genetically engineering can introduce novel proteins into fruit, vegetables, and these can trigger allergic reactions in those who are sensitive to that. So a protein that may not be developed by something in particular might end up in another food, and then this may cause allergies in people who are unsuspecting. And as we think about all of the people who are now having wheat allergies and gluten allergies and all of these different things, you start to wonder, when did people start really having all of these allergies, and what really is the cause? And we never quite hear what could be the cause, whether it's environmental or the foods that we're eating, because there's not a lot of money in these types of studies. There's money on the other side of producing these things so that they can be quickly and easily sold for cheap. So, for example, the FDA approved genetically engineered salmon for human consumption, despite reports from their own scientists that the fish's flesh was significantly less firm and contained more of the allergenic protein IGF-1 than wild salmon. This is why a lot of times you hear it's really important to get wild salmon, because there has been a lot of genetic alterations in the salmon that are produced in some of these farms. And the texture of the fish is quite different because the proteins in the fish are different, and they are aware of that, and it is still approved for human consumption. So, these are the things that we kind of have to think about when we are looking at food. So there's a lot going on. So, unfortunately, the FDA approval of the genetically engineered salmon was based on a study conducted by AquaBounty, the biotech company that created the novel fish breed, right? The FDA did not require an independent study to prove the safety, healthiness of that genetically engineered product prior to approving it for the public. And the FDA's own scientists even warned that AquaBounty salmon might cause increased risk for certain types of cancer, prompting them to call for further long-term studies. So it seems to be a theme of just kind of getting these things out there and then kind of looking to see how does it affect the community in 5 or 10 years, and then using that as your study. But at that time, a lot of people are quite affected. And that's why it's important as a consumer to keep up with what's going on and kind of do some research for yourself, because a lot of these papers are saying, oh, these things are fine and everything is good. And then other people are saying, hey, wait, let's look at this. And then it's not happening. It's important in science and in health that any type of red flags be taken seriously and studied appropriately, because you really don't know sometimes with new technology. So the FDA genetically engineered fish in 2015, but has yet to require any additional testing. So it is currently not labeled as genetically engineered in the marketplace. In fact, the FDA conducted no human clinical trials on the GMO foods before allowing them into most of the dinner plates. Likewise, in Canada, there's no requirement for mandatory human clinical trials before allowing novel food products into the market. And so you have to now compare that over in Europe, quite a few countries do not allow certain GMO foods even into the country, whereas in America, they've been very open to it. And so it tells you there are different streams of thought on this particular matter. And when you have that going on one side of the world, even some of the African and Asian nations rejecting certain foods that are allowed to be consumed in the United States, our standards of what comes into our country are at the level that they should be. So why did they create bioengineered foods? The article goes on to talk about in the U.S., GMO vegetables are typically engineered for resistance and increased tolerance to herbicides. And in most cases, plants have been engineered to resist pesticides or glyphosate containing herbicides such as Roundup, which is not good for us. So these chemicals, they were killing the plants, and obviously you can see they must not be good for us either. So why would you want to have plants that can sustain these types of chemicals so that they can be consumed by human beings? This allows farmers to use these genetically modified seeds to kill weeds without modified corn or soybean. Unfortunately, the results in dramatic increase in the use of these herbicides, which is not good for human beings. And some of these things have been banned in different places, such as Roundup and those things. And they've caused a lot of controversy in countries around the world, lawsuits and different things. So you have to wonder why parts of the world are still allowing this. And what are our laws or restrictions on GMOs or foods that have been used with these strong herbicides? What is it? I'm not sure. I'm sure that we even have a standard on some of that stuff. GMOs were created in the first place because big chemical companies like Monsanto saw opportunities to make billions of dollars to profit by selling patented seeds to farmers, and they continue to be developed primarily for this reason and to make money. And so not to improve our health, but to make money. And fruits and vegetables are where a lot of people get their vitamins. So these things do not need to be contaminated. So are foods sprayed with glyphosate harmful? Some people say that used in the industry, it's minimally toxic to humans, but others, including scientists within the United States, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, are concerned that these glyphosates may be contributing to a number of serious health problems such as cancers, birth defects, and gluten intolerance. And I touched on that. So these herbicides were originally created to kill plants. They're designed to inhibit an enzyme called EPSP synthase, which is necessary for plants to grow. So Monsanto, the creator of Roundup, claims that this glyphosate does not, because humans don't have this particular enzyme. But many scientists now believe that it may be harmful to humans because it inhibits more than just that particular enzyme, but affects other things. So it's been shown to kill beneficial gut bacteria and to change the expression of genes in human cells. So this is really, really serious stuff. The International Agency of Research on Cancer, IARC, an autonomous arm of the World Health Organization, recently classified glyphosate as a probable human carcinogen based on evidence from animal studies that showed it can cause cancer. So you can see that sometimes things that are accepted at first, without the proper studies, that some of these things cause cancer. And this is why people really deserve to have an opportunity or a choice when it comes to the foods and the products that go into their body, because later down the line, when we have more information, it's very difficult to go back and then say who may have gotten ill, who may have had a problem because of this. And this is the way that they're doing kind of, science and health these days, where, companies are being allowed to present something, provide the study, and there's not a lot of independent study on that. And that can be quite dangerous. The other concerns that there are with bioengineered food is that the creation of new diseases is one of the biggest concerns about genetic engineering. New diseases arise every year, and the way they spread is unpredictable. Predict where new diseases will arise because they can't accurately predict where new diseases will arise because they don't fully understand what will happen when DNA from radically different species are combined. So what's really disturbing about that is how little research has been done on this topic, on the possible adverse effects on humans. But of course, like some other things, it's deemed safe. While new diseases and viruses are a problem, old diseases may also become a prevalent issue because of genetic engineering. For example, bovine spongiform encephalopathy, BSE, or mad cow's disease can be transmitted to humans through the consumption of beef and prions and other rogue proteins. So they're touching on not just the plants, we're getting into engineering of the animals. There's some chicken that has had some bioengineering, and so we have to be cautious of this. The first case of BSE in cows appearing coding for a protein or prion from another species into the cow's DNA, and therefore make their milk more nutritious. So we've got a lot of people dabbling in our food and in our animal sources. We have no idea why a lot of cows have died or were killed recently. There's a lot of mysterious things that are going on. And so in order to make good choices, we need a lot more transparency in the development of food and farming and agriculture and our medical and science-based arenas. So what is the long-term problem that they're considering? And what are the alternatives? And then we kind of look at the history of some of the stuff. Okay, long-term effects of bioengineered foods are not known completely. For instance, no human feeding studies exist for any of the bioengineered food on the market today. The best studies from the biotech industry itself have shown that consuming bioengineered soybeans for only 3 generations, hamsters had dramatically reduced sperm production and abnormal embryos. So when they fed the bioengineered soybeans, which were one of the first plants to be bioengineered, after 3 generations, the hamsters, the little animals that they were feeding this to, there was reduction in sperm production and abnormal embryos, so affecting fertility and the production of new hamsters is probably going to be a problem. The insulin-producing cells in the pancreas of mice that were given genetically engineered proteins completely shut down after only 10 days. And other studies from biotech industries have shown that the intestines of animals that were fed bioengineered corn absorbed nutrients, and that the liver of rats fed by bioengineered canola also became fatty and diseased. And so I've actually seen quite a few cases lately of just like normal women with fatty liver disease. So with this information, I always tell my patients you need to take a deep dive into the foods that you're eating and try to limit foods that are going to cause you inflammation and problems. And so you can see not a lot of study in humans, but some effects that were reported in animals. According to Jeffrey Smith, the author of Seeds of Deception, genetically engineering can damage or rearrange genes, resulting in changes to a food's nutritional content, creation of new toxins, and cause unexpected allergenic effects. So genetic engineering also threatens many non-food plants that support our ecosystem, like wildflowers. For example, Monsanto's designed to resist herbicides Roundup have escaped into the environment and is living across North America. This is erasing populations of wild canola, which are vital to the life support system that sustains many species in our ecosystem, such as bees, butterflies, moths, birds, and more. I don't know if that's happening here, but I rarely ever see bees, butterflies, moths, or even birds, for that matter, in this country. I don't know what's going on. And these are the types of things that we really need authorities to kind of look into and see what is going on. Are there less butterflies and bees and all this kind of stuff like that? So what alternatives to bioengineered foods? There are many ways of creating new variations of plants that do not involve genetic engineering. Is crossbreeding plants with desirable traits over several generations through extensive field trials. This process does not create new disease or viruses, or it doesn't involve using foreign DNA. It also allows us to test new variants in the real world conditions before becoming available to farmers, gardeners, which helps to ensure the healthiest product with minimal environmental impact. So what the article is saying is that we don't need to genetically engineer foods. There are other ways of getting the plants and the crops that we need that will be adaptable to today's environment. I think it's important that people have this information, because you need to start lobbying your government to let them know that you are aware of this stuff and that you don't want it, because the only way to kind of push back on this form of commercialization and this unresponsible capitalism, because I'm a capitalist, but I don't believe in unresponsible capitalism where you put the money over the people. It has to be about supplying the needs of people, and then you get something in return. So the way to deal with that really is to kind of ensure that people are aware, and then those people say, hey, we don't want this, we prefer something else. But you have to know that in the first place. How do you avoid eating GMOs? That's really good question, because this is what really kind of stirred this whole thing for me, is because I'm realizing that, these things aren't properly labeled, and I'm going to go into that on actually what happened in America. But how do you steer away from it? There's so much food that's been modified. There's so much stuff. We get so much stuff from North America that we are consuming this stuff, and we have been for years, and the labeling is supposed to help, but it doesn't really. So what do we do? So the European Union, Japan, and Australia, which all require foods containing GMOs to be labeled as such. The US, however, is nearly impossible to tell if your food has been genetically modified unless you buy completely organic. Similarly, in Canada, there's no mandatory labeling, except for what I'm going to talk about, the most recent mandatory labeling that's happened in the US, which it's still not the best. So it's difficult to avoid bioengineered foods because they're in most processed foods: cookies, crackers, sauces, soups, salad dressing. Anything that requires any kind of processing and it's not the raw food, it's probably going to be bioengineered, especially if it's coming from the USA. And most common foods that human consumption in Canada are soybeans, including soybean oil, corn, and canola. Other significant include sugar beets, zucchini, yellow summer squash, plum tomatoes, papaya from Hawaii, and some other variations of potatoes. The easiest way to avoid eating a GMO food is to buy organic, it can be very expensive. Foods that are certified organic by third-party organizations like EcoCert or Quality Assurance International cannot contain GMOs. And you can also look for non-GMO project labels. You have to keep informed, and it's difficult, though, to keep up with a lot of that stuff. In summary, the article talks that genetically engineered foods are unhealthy because they introduce new diseases and they may cause old diseases to become common again. They also threaten our ecosystem, like the bees and the butterflies, the moths, the birds, and more. And genetic engineering is fraught with uncertainty since its risks are new and unstudied. More independent scientific research must be conducted to better understand the impact of bioengineering on all aspects of our environment, including soil health and seed viability. Best way to avoid eating GMO is to support organic farming and buying only organic products when possible, and to stay informed. And so this is going to be why it's so important. And any government that supports local farming also needs to also encourage organic farming. All right. So that is the beginning of it all. And that is the conversation that we are going to continue. The numbers are 323-6232, 325-4316, 325-4259. Do you have an issue with genetically engineered food? Should we know what's in our food stores? And should we as consumers be concerned with this? I'll take a break in a second. I just want to also kind of dive into a really simple and nice kind of a flyer that I found from USD, United States Department of Agriculture. And it's talking about bioengineered food and its most recent change in the way that foods are packaged when they are bioengineered. So they have this really little cute sticker. It looks like a sunny field with corn or something like that in it. And it says bioengineered, right? So the word GMO, they're not really pushing that in the US. They've kind of changed it to this bioengineered food. And that's why it's important to know what a GMO is and how that's linked to bioengineered food. So what they say on their little information card is, and this is straight from the Agricultural Marketing Service, the United States Department of Agriculture. It says, what is a bioengineered food? Material that has been modified through certain laboratory techniques for which the modification could not be obtained through conventional breeding or found in nature. So you're going an unnatural course. It says ingredients in foods that met the definition of bioengineered must include a disclosure on the package or label. And this sounds really good, right? Bioengineered food labels are for marketing purposes and do not convey any information about the health, safety, or environmental attributes of that food compared to non-bioengineered food. So they're not really saying it's safe, it's not safe, or anything about it. They're just kind of giving you a label. How will bioengineered foods be labeled? Now, this is the tricky part because they actually kind of gave them options, I realized. So what I realized is that I was looking for foods labeled bioengineered or contains a bioengineered food ingredient, which is one way that they label it, right? Contains a bioengineered food ingredient. And if you look at a lot of packaging, it does have that. But there are some things that are bioengineered or contain things that are bioengineered that aren't labeled that way because they have kind of like 4 options. The next option is a symbol in black and white or color with that same logo that I talked about, like the little cornfield with the bioengineered, it looks all beautiful and sunny. That's 2. However, they can have an electronic or digital link on there that explains, or a phone number that consumers can text. So I don't know a lot of people that are going to go and text to find out if they're bioengineered stuff in their foods, or even have the time to do a digital link, although you may have to find the time to do it. But I think it's kind of have one symbol, a simple symbol saying bioengineered food, and that goes on everything. There's a lot of other stuff that I found that were, just not making this an effective system, such as kind of loopholes for companies that were smaller companies that weren't producing more than $2.5 million worth of food. And, all these little linkages, and, restaurants in the United States don't have to really state these things, or if you use the product and create something else, you don't have to state it. So really, a lot of this stuff means that we're at the whims and the fancy of whoever has this stuff. And for some reason, I don't understand why you put so much technology into a food, but it is actually cheaper than just growing regular food. And I guess they're saying it's because the plants can survive better and all that kind of stuff. But all of this work into creating these foods that may not be good for us, and charging us excessively on the foods that organic and just naturally produce. And so there seems to be an issue there. And why can't we get just regular plain old organic foods to be cheaper? Why are we paying more for it just being done the regular way? Why is it cheaper for this food that has all its engineered parts to actually be the thing that gets to us much more quickly? So I find that this is a problem. So we all need to know about this. So I would suggest, if you're going into the food store, if you're looking to purchase foods, to take a look. And what you may find is that there's no way out of it. Like, all of the food is like that. So what could we do? I would say the first step of being aware is letting your leaders, the people who allow food to come into your country, to know that this is not what you want. You want to take a different route if that's what you want. And you want to lobby for better food coming into the country, some type of standard, and maybe more support for our farmers in the country, because and not just to do farming in the same way as these American farmers are doing a lot of farming, but organic farming. Maybe that's what we need to be more specific in putting the money behind organic farming and certifying that these things are organic. So the little flyer goes on to talk about what does derived from mean, because like I said, there's a lot of tricky ways in which they do the way that they label the product. So it says that you may also see derived from bioengineering or ingredients derived from a bioengineered source on the label. In this case, the company has chosen to disclose that they are using highly refined ingredients that do not contain detectable modified organic material in the finished product. So these products are so refined, they've been so processed that you may not be able to detect the modified genetic material, but that is where it's coming from, right? Like I said, we don't know what this means for us. So it goes on this government pamphlet. And for those of you just joining us, we are reading the United States Department of Agriculture, Agricultural Marketing Services, the frequently asked questions. So I think someone just tried to join me online, but he can't join me online, but you can type in a question or something like that. I'll definitely take it and we can talk about that, but I can't have you join on the online platform, okay? But I see you guys. Thank you. Thank you for joining. And so so they have a frequently asked questions. So what food requires bioengineered food disclosure? So the foods that they're requiring to be labeled with bioengineered food are really highly refined ingredients like some sugars and oils, foods. And that's the thing, sugars and oils go into a lot of other things. And that's what makes it very kind of problematic, because these are the kind of ingredients that go to make other foods. And so even by that means, it's very difficult to escape. Claudette Grant online. Good evening, Dr. Archer. Good evening, Bahamas. Thank you. Thank you for joining with us. And foods that are primarily some meat, poultry, egg products do not require a bioengineered food disclosure. Food sold by a very small food manufacturer and food served in restaurants, food trucks, trains, airplanes, delicatessens, and similar retail food establishments. So if you're sending me comments via WhatsApp or Facebook or anything like that, it's kind of difficult for me to read that because I am using my phone to do the live online. So send me the message either on Facebook or give me a call on Guardian Radio 323-6232, 325-4316, 325-4259, because I'm getting requests from places that I cannot quite respond. Okay, he's telling me I have to take a quick break. So let's take a break. We're going to come back and kind of just finish up the frequently asked questions and what can we do.
Beulah gal, can you believe this? We are now the patrol queens of the neighborhood.
We now large and in charge. So we need to check out what's going on in everybody's yard. What about that gun that we know that Junior and his homeboys just ran out? Can we report that too?
Of course we can.
But we could be in deep trouble if they find out.
We need to report what we see, Beulah. When you call Crime Stoppers, they just answer your call in Miami.
So then we can report everything? Guns, where they hiding the drugs, who shoot who part of which gang, or who disturbing the peace with the loud music and the motorcycles.
Then our neighborhood will be the best in the Bahamas, and everybody gonna want to come live here. And then our house price will go.
See something, say something. Let us all pitch in and stop the crime before it's your time. Call 328-8477 from Nassau or 242-300-8477 from the Family Islands. Or text us through the Crack Crime Bahamas app. Stop the crime before it's your time.
Look what he just texted me. Oh my goodness. Watch out! Mobile devices are killing pedestrians, as there have been nearly 6,000 deaths and over 11,000 injuries as a result of texting and walking. Don't make your next text your last breath. Brought to you by UB Radio in conjunction with Guardian Radio 96.9.
Our program tonight brought to you by Medical Concierge Services. Catch us on Facebook, Instagram, and our website, and you can reach out to us at 326-1521 or WhatsApp 432-4010. We got a comment online that says, when I go, because some of these foods are really bad for human consumption, I'm finding out a lot more than we even realize. Also, she says, I'm glad that I'm off of all meat, fish, also white flour, sugar, rice, and also all dairy products. Wow, what do you eat, Claudette? The only thing with the red meat is if you can get organic or really good cuts of red meat, I would say keep a bit of red meat in your diet. And I know a lot of people say their doctors have told them to come off of red meat. But what I'm finding is a lot of people are iron deficient. Men and women are becoming iron deficient because they're not eating enough iron-rich foods. Now, you can get iron from green leafy vegetables and some other sources. It doesn't seem to provide enough nutritional value for some people, especially women who have periods every month and they're losing blood. So I see a lot of anemia. So now my first question when I see that you're anemic is, do you eat red meat? And a lot of people said, I gave up red meat, blah, 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 blah. The problem is finding, good quality of meat that's not going to have all these problems, and not to eat much. We tend to be extreme in the Bahamas. It's either nothing or all, but we need to be moderate. She also said you have to be careful when buying food because nothing can be trusted these days. Yes. And so I'm definitely decreased eating out. I definitely see a difference between eating food even in restaurants when I'm in Europe versus when I'm in the United States, or even sometimes here in the Bahamas. Whenever I go to the US, I get very ill the first couple days, especially if we're eating out. And so I know there's something kind of off with the food, at least for me. I do not get the same thing when I eat in Europe or London or certain places. I mean, some parts of London don't accept as much of that stuff. So I usually feel the difference in the food, the freshness and stuff. I went to a lot of local markets when I was in London. So they take pride in, buying local produce and kind of supporting that. And so it's really important to get good food, good high quality food. And that's what we should strive for when we talk about food security. I've talked about this in the past. It's not just having access to food, but it's having access to healthy food that is good for our bodies. We do not need to be somebody's experiment somewhere in the world. She also said, I think we have to have a backup plan about iron intake with supplements. So I don't like iron supplements as much. I mean, I do it if people really have to have it, because there's some people that just need it because their iron stores are just that low, or they can't eat red meat for certain things. But it does come with its own set of problems. Some people have constipation and other issues, GI issues, because of iron tablets if they're using them often. So we do need to find natural ways to get them into our body and our system. And she said you can get organic minced meat at the organic store. Yeah, certain things. And then, people can't afford these things, so we need to find ways to make them more affordable. Maybe I should go back to my grandfather's farm and start rearing cows again. Maybe, who knows? He was the one who brought cows from Key. So there you have it. All right. So that's definitely a consideration. So 323-6232, 325-4316, 325-4259, because I really can't take anything that's coming to my WhatsApp right now. But let's kind of conclude what we were talking about. All right, so we were talking about the frequently asked questions that the U.S. agricultural market had posed in regard to this. And they talked about how this is required but not required by everyone. And so the BE symbol, the biologically engineered symbol on the food products, food manufacturing and retailers are required to provide this starting January 1st, 2022. So this is where you may have seen, if you turn around, because that's the first thing you do these days, get something that's packaged in the food store, turn it around, look at the ingredients. The longer the list, probably the more processed it is. And then now they have these BE requirements on there. And then sometimes they're not telling you directly. They're telling you you need to send us a message or text us to find out what's really inside this food. And so they're making it a little difficult, some of these companies, in order to really find out what's in the food. It says, am I already eating bioengineered food? And they answer quite honestly, yes. Most of us are already eating bioengineered foods. They're already on the market. Varieties of a few fresh fruits, vegetables, crops such as apples and papayas And also certain grains and seeds such as soy, canola are all bioengineered. Is there a list of bioengineered foods? Yes. The USD Agricultural Marketing Services maintains that there is a list of bioengineered foods. The website that this is https go.usa.gov/XV capital WDC. So the go.usa gov website does have an AMS list of all the bioengineered food. I'm sure that list is going to be extremely long. So some of your favorite snacks and foods are probably bioengineered. If you're having lots of problems with inflammation and chronic disease, these are the foods that you want to get rid of first. And then then start looking at maybe what vegetables might be there. And so if you get them out of your life and then you focus on trying to maybe spend a few extra dollars on organic food and less on processed food, you may be able to escape this. But I think what's going to get us out of there is lobbying our leaders to know that we don't want this type of food. We want to be the type of country that, is strictly organic, non-GMO, non-genetically engineered food coming in, and that there is a standard for food coming into the Bahamas. So bioengineered foods, use the term bioengineered. They have here bioengineered food includes certain types of genetically modified foods, as we talked about. And then Congress started using this term of BE when they passed the National Bioengineered Food Disclosure Standard. Although companies may use the term GMO or genetically modified organism or genetic engineering on their labels, they must also use bioengineered food or contains a bioengineered food ingredient to comply with these new standards. How do you file a complaint if the product does not include bioengineered food? Well, starting the 1st of January of last year, you can file a complaint with the AMS website. And that's what the American have to say on that. And there were a lot of other really great articles on this whole thing that we're not going to have a chance to go into. But I think I just want to, before we go, just kind of touch on this last part about science and the history of GMOs and other modified foods, so you can have an idea of when all of this started and how long we've been eating these processed foods, and maybe why we're seeing a lot of the conditions we do in our communities. This other comment online, the government really needs to do something because it's so much bad food coming into the Bahamas. Yes, it's so much bad food. We see a lot of export-only food. Now we're seeing a lot of the bioengineered food. We really have to wonder what we're going to do. I had a clip. Can we play the clip? I won't play the clip because it's going to be too long. I had a clip. Maybe we'll play it next week. But it's just about how our genetically engineered changing of plants, they talk about how it's actually done. And then how they identify the particular DNA, they copy it, they insert it into the new plant. And that's how they get it done. But there was another, let me see if I can find it. It talks about the history, really, of how all of this was done, and that, this technology was kind of developed in the 1960s, and they kind of meddled with it over time into the 1970s. By 82, we were having our first kind of product that was being made and produced out there for human consumption. And literally from then, we've been kind of dealing with this. Yeah. Oh, here it is, a timeline of genetically modified agriculture. So it talks about how in 1866, they started kind of this basic process of identifying different species and breeding them and stuff like that, and doing hybrids. So hybrids have been around from the 1920s. And then in the 1940s, they started using radiation and chemicals to randomly change an organism's DNA. So they've been dabbling with food for some time. And as you can see, we live longer, but are we living as healthy as, some of our ancestors? So by 1953, building on the discoveries of that chemist, Rosalind Franklin, other scientists started identifying the DNA structure By 1973, biochemist Herbert Boyer and Cohen developed genetic engineering by inserting DNA from one bacteria into another. By 1982, the FDA had already approved the first consumer GMO product developed through genetic engineering, human insulin to treat diabetes. And then federal government by 86 established coordinated frameworks for regulation. The FDA policy stated that GMO foods in 1992 had to including safety standards, foods, and traditionally, just like traditionally bred plants, but then we didn't have that intense amount of study. In the 1990s, you had the first wave of our GMO produced produce being created, and genetic engineering becomes available to consumers. And it started with squash, soybean, cotton, corn, papaya, tomatoes, potatoes, and cornola. I don't buy anything with canola in it. I've been doing olive oil based out of Europe. In 2003, World Health Organization and the Food and Agricultural Organization, the FAO of the United Nations, developed international guidelines and standards. The GMO alfalfa and sugar beans are produced and sold in the United States. By 2015, we see that the FDA approves application for the first genetic modification in animals for use. And that's where the genetically altered salmon comes in. By 2016, Congress had passed a law requiring labeling. 2017, GMO apples available in the United States. So an apple a day, and this is what they did to them. In 2019, FDA completes consultation on first foods from a genome-edited plant. By 2020, we got pink pineapples. And by 2020, the application for the Galsay pig was approved. So this has been kind of going on for quite some time. And so that's why we're here. Yeah. Okay. Someone else is asking a question. It says, if the threshold of toxicological concern is not ill influence, why are there arising cancers and diseases? A simple associating a cause of the glyphosate has been in almost everyone in America. I'm trying to read this comment. This also kills the microorganism and nourish the soil, correct? The fulvic acid produced by the later reacts with the glyphosate. Just Google fulvic acid and glyphosate. Okay, yeah, so the commenter is talking on some of the points that we talked about earlier, the fact that we have seen all of these cancers and diseases. We don't know what's causing them. Can we then impose a timeline of all of these introduction of these different types of plants and genetic altered stuff on the development of all these cancers? That's the problem. People aren't looking at those things, even though it seems like the most obvious thing to research, because there's not a lot of money in researching where these things are coming from. The money is from the treatment of these diseases. And yes, there's a lot of information, the fact that these genetically engineered products are affecting not just the plants and humans, but also their surroundings. And so that's about all the time that we have. I really thought it was important to do this topic, and I really want behemoths to start thinking about the food that they put into their body, being more selective, and getting on your leaders, your politicians, whoever has any type of power in this country, to let them know that we need better food and we need a detailed plan for food security here in this country. So I want you to take care, Bahamas, take care of yourself, drink lots of water. It's hot out here. And I want to thank you for listening to the Doctors In tonight with me, Dr. D. Archer. I'll see you all next week for another show of health, wellness, and society. Good night.